Hi, this is Greg Kilstrom. Welcome to Season 3 of The Agile World, where we discuss customer and employee experience, organizational and workforce transformation, and how business can adapt and continually improve in an agile age. The Agile World podcast is brought to you by TEKsystems, an industry leader in full-stack technology services, talent services, and real-world application. For more information, go to teksystems.com. To read more about the topics discussed in this show, you can go to my website at theagile.world and read my latest articles, or get a copy of my latest book, The Agile Workforce, now available on Amazon and other retailers. My name is Greg Kilstrom, and I'm the host of the Agile World podcast. Today we're going to talk about the need for a balance between consumer privacy and providing advertisers with meaningful data which can ultimately benefit both parties when done well and with the proper intent. To help me discuss this topic, I'd like to welcome Anudit Vikram, Chief Product Officer at MediaMath. Anudit, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Greg. Great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, looking forward to talking with you. So let's get started by giving a little background on yourself and MediaMath for those less familiar with the company.
Absolutely. Yeah. So MediaMath is a DSP, or, we love these acronyms in the ad tech world, but DSP stands for Demand Side Platform, which means that essentially MediaMath provides a technological platform for brands and advertisers and agencies to run their marketing campaigns effectively in the programmatic world. What that basically means is that when you as a brand or an agency want to have your marketing messages seen by people who are either online on the internet via their laptops or desktops or mobile phones, or they're on OTT devices watching streaming video or any of those channels, and now also including audio as well as digital out of home. We provide you with the means of running those campaigns most effectively, helping you get in front of your customers with the kind of message that you want to be in front of them, and then to be able to see how your campaigns are performing so that you can appropriately manage your budgets and make sure that you're getting the return that you want from your marketing investments. As far as myself, I have a pretty nice and long background in the advertising technology space, if you will. I mean, I've been here in the space around from 2005 2006, which pretty much is the time when programmatic kind of started. And I've been fortunate enough to work with some pretty interesting names in the space, including companies like Yahoo, and then Merkle, which is an agency, Dun& Bradstreet, commercial data company, and then, of course, now MediaMath on the DSP side.
Let's dive in here and start by, at a high level, talking about the challenge. So most in the marketing and advertising world have at least heard something about this move to phase out third-party cookies and requiring advertisers and marketers to rely on first-party solutions instead. Can you talk a little bit about how we got where we currently are, as well as some of the challenges with third-party cookies?
Yeah, certainly. Third-party cookies is it's a topic du jour. I think we've been talking about this for a while now. It's in some ways you think about it as the boon and the bane of digital programmatic advertising.
Yeah.
Now, for those who don't know very well, I mean, the cookie itself is just a simple little file that is placed on the computer, but it has a very, very deep meaning in our industry, in our space, because it kind of evens the playing field, allows you as a data provider, or you as an advertiser, or you as a consumer, to have methodology or a mechanic by which you are able to share information across various constituents in the space. Also, the third-party cookie kind of accounts for, actually, no, let me take that back. The cookie itself, the concept of the cookie accounts for the fact that the internet is at its very, very core a disconnected system, or an asynchronous system, wherein you go to a website and you start reading the content. When you ask for the content, the website knows who you are and starts displaying the content, but then the connection breaks till you ask for something again. So every time that you're engaging with a website, it's almost like you're a new person coming back in. And so the cookie is what allows the website to know that you're the same person coming back, so they can do things with you. Now, in used in the right fashion or used in different fashions, the cookie allows for things like allowing you to put items in the cart and then check them out later without worrying about the fact that, if you were to just move away from your computer, your cart will vanish. Or allows you to read your New York Times article every day without having to log in every time that you go to the New York Times website. And then that's the typical use of the cookie. But then we realized that we could do a lot more with the cookie, and we created what was called as a third-party cookie, wherein you could store information in the cookie which was collected by somebody who was not necessarily a first party in the transaction. So I, as a user, am reading content on New York Times, but some other third party can be collecting information about me on the New York Times website and then using that for doing things. As an example, using that for showing me targeted ads. Now, the cookie by itself was good from that perspective, but then it became, questionable around, am I, as a consumer, able to fully understand how many third parties are collecting information about me? And then the privacy rules and all of that started coming into play. And we got to a point now where we are more concerned than not about the fact that there is an invasion, if you will, of the consumer privacy because an independent third party is collecting information that the user may or may not have agreed to share with that known third party.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
where this whole situation where we are in right now comes into play, which is, it is difficult for us to, for the want of a better word, truly monitor slash police what is happening in the third party universe, because these are all disconnected systems that are collecting data or sharing information. And therefore, from a privacy and compliance perspective, we are at a point where we're saying maybe we should move away from this concept of third party cookies and only allow first party interactions to happen, wherein the consumer is clear on who they are sharing the data with and what can be done with that data.
So would you characterize this shift away from third party and more exclusively to first party information as a step in the right direction? And I guess follow up to that would be, is this only about consumer privacy or are there other factors as well?
Great question, Greg. And so the leading line here is certainly consumer privacy, right? So the reason why all of this brouhaha is happening all around us about the third party cookie itself is because of the fact that privacy comes into play, and it is very difficult to maintain the kind of privacy rules that we want to be able to follow in the third party context.
Yeah.
But let's not ignore the fact that the value or the quality of data collected in the third party context was always questionable,
Right.
right? Like, because we were collecting data in the third party context, we weren't necessarily 100% clear on who the user was. Because remember, the user, to the third party who's collecting data, the user doesn't have a direct relationship with them. So they may be inferring some information. And then this data was shared and then modeled and then further shared and so on, and then extrapolated off of. And you landed up in a point where it was known that the quality is questionable depending on who the data provider is, how many levels um, of how many degrees of separation you actually have between the user providing the data and then the data provider then collecting and then sharing that information.
Right.
And so I would say shifting to first party, while privacy led, also allows us to account for the fact that there is a lot of the unknown that the third party cookie introduces that are difficult to manage around.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of reminds me of the in the financial world, like the derivatives and the, some
Mhm.
some of those things that got us into other whole other types of issues years ago, and probably
Exactly.
still, yeah. Another thing on this is, I mean, it sounds like there's a lot of consensus around that it is a good thing, and I agree with you that I don't see anything wrong with a win-win solution
Mhm.
that's good for consumers as well as for the advertisers. I think that's a great thing, and I think that gives it a reason to sustain and succeed. But the timeline on the move away from this has gotten pushed back a
Mhm.
few times. I did a little research, but I saw a few deadlines getting pushed back and things. Why does this keep happening? And do you think the current sort of self-imposed deadlines are that Google and others are going to stick to that, or do you see this getting pushed back further?
Yeah, so it gets pushed back for a bunch of reasons. It gets pushed back because, one, as much as we agree on the potential, pitfalls of the third party cookie, there is a close to triple digit billion-dollar industry that has been built on the backs of the third party cookie, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
you can't just kind of wipe it out and not have seismic changes happening across the entire industry. And therefore, a lot of eyes are looking at it. A lot of systems need to be recalibrated. A lot of new processes need to be created, and then it isn't a simple shift, right? It isn't something
Yeah.
like, okay, today we're using third-party cookie, tomorrow we're going to stop it and shift everything to the first-party cookie, and life will go on as it always did.
Right.
Like if that was true, then there would not be all of this problem. But that is not true. We know that we have to make a bunch of changes, and those changes need time, and they need testing, and a lot of the power, if you will, is consolidated. While Google is talking about phasing out the third-party cookie, Google is proposing alternatives to it, which in a lot of ways actually benefit Google,
Yeah.
and it benefit Google a lot more than the benefit Google had with the current systems in place, because at least when there was the third-party context available, then everybody was playing in the same playing field, and everybody could create their own third-party data set and so on. And now suddenly you're going to be dependent on Google to do a bunch of things, and that is concerning to a few. And so, there are many eyeballs looking at it. A lot of watchdogs are watching how this changes. A lot of questions are being asked at the compliance regulatory policy levels, and that keeps pushing things ahead. On our side as well, we know that at some point in time the third party cookie has to go away, because like we discussed just a few minutes ago, it is the right thing to do. But you can't just do that without making sure that you have taken care of how will you continue to run business in a manner as effective as possible and as scaled as possible when that third party cookie is not there. And that's another thing which the industry is preparing for right now.
Yeah.
We on the MediaMath side have been very, very clear about the fact that that world of identity, that the world of the cookie itself is changing, and therefore we need to be ready for a world where the third party cookie is not available and the first party identity context has to come into play. So we have put a bunch of things in place. We have systems ready. We actually have a playbook created for how do you work in the first party context. But we need to give time to our customers and clients to ensure that they are ready to be able to work with their counterparts in the ecosystem, as well as with on our platform, to be able to maximize the efficacy of the systems in this new first party context.
Well, yeah, and let's talk a little bit about future state now. You touched on some of this already, but you've used the terms accountable and addressable, those two in terms of the role of advertising. Can you define those for the audience, and why you think that's so important?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And so we at MediaMath we came out with this with a term that we call source, a concept, a philosophy built off of a bunch of technological tools and systems that allow you to address one very, very important need in the industry right now, which is the need for transparency in the ad tech supply chain. And what I mean by that is when you look at the ad tech supply chain, between the advertiser who is spending $1 to show an ad to a consumer, and the consumer who is seeing that ad on some digital content, right? A website, a mobile app, uh, a streamed video, a digital out of home billboard, whatever that might be. There are many, many intermediaries that come into play. MediaMath, as an example, is an intermediary which is allowing the advertiser to run those campaigns. You have supply side platforms that are other intermediaries. You have measurement systems. You have data providers. There are a bunch of different intermediaries that create this entire supply chain between the dollar being spent and the customer seeing or the consumer seeing the ad. And the way the system was designed, and because of the number of people that play a role in it, it's a complex ecosystem where it is difficult to understand whether the buyer and the seller are actually getting full value of the dollar that is being transacted. And so MediaMath's promise to the ecosystem was to create the right kind of tools that will allow us to provide transparency into the supply chain so that the buyer and the seller, the advertiser and the publisher, the consumer in whatever role they play, can feel confident in the fact that their money is being put to the right use, right? And as a part of providing this transparency, we came up with three things that we believe are the core tenets to this transparency in the supply chain. And two of them are what you called out, which is accountable and addressable. The third one is aligned. So let me just take a second and walk you through what that means.
Sure.
Addressable Addressable talks about the fact that you, as a buyer, have the right to know that the money that you spent is being spent on a real user who is seeing the ad, right? It's not a bot, it is not
Right.
some kind of a fraudulent impression. It is not an impression that is coming way below the fold in a website where you thought you showed somebody an ad, but the person wasn't really there. And so addressability is about providing you transparency into the fact that there is a real user and that user is actually seeing your ad. And I'm super simplifying here, but just to give you a high
Yeah.
level idea, right? Accountability talks about the fact that the buyer and the seller need to feel comfortable that the supply chain itself, is accountable to the dollar being spent. It is transparent. If there are three intermediaries in between the buyer and the seller, and each of them is charging a 10% fee for the value that they are providing, then the buyer and the seller need to know the total amount of fee that has actually been charged across this entire chain. And therefore, if $1 spent translated into 70 cents on the seller side, that is fine. But you should know exactly where that fee was spent, and you should have a method or the tools to allow you to control that spend. So, we created tools that we call as supply path optimization tools or supply path management tools, which allow you to choose the kind of path that you want to be able to follow for the supply and the demand to be able to speak with each other. And this gives you accountability into the supply chain. And then you didn't ask me this, but there's the third tenet, which is aligned. And aligned is about saying that the buy side and the sell side are fully aligned with each other. They share information with each other so that the consumer reaps the benefit of an ad that actually makes sense to them. The buyer reaps the benefit of the fact that they can actually make the right kind of decisions on how much to pay for a given ad. And the seller reaps the benefit of ensuring that they are working with the right kind of buyers and they're able to drive maximum ROI for themselves as well. And so the three tenets together, accountable, addressable, and aligned, allow us to provide the kind of transparency in the supply chain that we believe the buyers and sellers and the consumers deserve, given the complexity of the chain today.
Does this reduce the number of players in the chain, or does it just give visibility
Um,
to who is in the chain?
the concept by itself does not say that you need to reduce the number of players. You can have as many players as you want, as long as you believe that that is the most efficient chain for you,
Yeah.
right? We provide you with the tools to have the visibility and then to make decisions. So for example, you can say, I let's use an example where IBM is the buyer and they're buying a piece of inventory on newyorktimes.com. uh, they could be getting access to New York Times via a certain SSP, via a certain direct path, via some other consolidated supply source. And an SSP could be giving them a higher frequency of the user. A direct connection might be giving them access to New York Times own data, which allows IBM to make specific decisions. Or a consolidated supply source might be giving them larger volume of inventory available. All three are equally right
Yeah.
in what they are providing to you. But you, as the buyer, should be able to make the decision that based on the campaign goals that you have, based on the ROI you want to reach, based on the amount of money you want to spend, what is the best path for you? Instead of that path being completely opaque and you being forced to do, just say, okay, I want New York Times, and whoever can give me New York Times, I'll pay you whatever it takes to get New York Times.
So, what should advertisers and marketers be doing now to prepare for this shift?
There are two shifts, if you will, right? There is the shift on, we now have the tools and techniques to see that, to have that visibility into the chain. So as a marketer, you want to be able to understand what these tools can do for you. You want to be able to work with, if I was to use MediaMath as an example, your account managers at MediaMath, to ensure that you are looking at your supply path, to ensure we have a solution that we call Brain Sync, which basically allows the buy side and the sell side to share bidding information with each other so that you can then make smarter bidding decisions, or that you are able to pull the right kind of reports that show you exactly where the money is being spent in the chain, and then make appropriate decisions based on that. That's one shift, if you will, that we are allowing you to take and do. Right on the other side, there is this whole shift of, we are moving from this mainly third-party data context world into a first-party data context world, right?
Yeah.
We are telling you that your the way you've been transacting in the past will actually change. And actually, if you've seen what's come out of Apple in the recent past and what we know will come out of Google pretty soon, is this concept of the identifiers that were typically used before kind of going away. So the way you do measurement, the way you do attribution and reporting, that changes. And and therefore what we say you should do is, again, work with your partners in this ecosystem. To use MediaMath as an example, work with us so that you can run the kind of tests that you need to run. You have the runway right now of running your campaigns using third party data to achieve the scale that you want to, while testing out first party data to see whether you're getting the value that you want with whoever you've chosen as your identity provider. We can recommend identity providers for you. We can tell you how you should be looking at your campaign so that they provide you the right value. So run those tests. Make sure that you can balance out the first and third party world. There is going to be a period of time when both first party and third party will continue to exist, as right now they do. So maximize the opportunity given to you to run all of those various A/B testing or experiments that you want, so that you're ready for the time when the third party cookie goes away, and you are now in that pure first party context. But you can run your business the way you always have run your business, but in this first party context now.
Can you talk a little bit about the living in the kind of the dual worlds of first party and third party data right now? Like, what should that look like? Or, I know you kind of touched on that just now, but what should that look like for marketers and advertisers now?
Think about it this way: like the world today, if we were to ignore what has happened over the last maybe year and a half, when we've been doing so much work around first parties. The world before the first party context became so important was around essentially leveraging third party cookies and third party data for achieving scale, so that you can find the users you want to find wherever you want to find them on the internet. We always knew that there was higher value to the first party data, right? So anybody who had access to first party data at scale absolutely used or wanted to use their first party data for running their campaigns. But the key term there was at scale, right? We've known for a long time that, except for a select few who have very, very large customer bases, you won't have first party data available to you at the scale that you need to be able to reach all the consumers that you're trying to target.
Yeah.
And therefore, we always deferred back to the third party. What you have today is enough work being done in the first party context to be able to see how much you can scale your first party data, or how you can work with others. So, for example, at MediaMath, we allow you to use any first party data or first party identity solution that you want, and be able to transact that natively on our platform. At the same time, we allow you to expand that first party data context into other first party identities. So you could decide to bring your first party data on board using, let's say, Zeotap or Brightpool or IOTA, and then you could expand that out into a Mercury or a LiveRamp, depending on what kind of contractual rules you are allowed to based on the contracts you have with different parties. And and you can then also, for today, expand that out into a third party data set. So while you build up the scale of your first party data, you can fall back on third party data to achieve the scale. You can run campaigns in parallel using first and third party to see the efficacy of the campaigns themselves. So you are no longer having to give up on the scale just to get the efficacy, because you can run both the campaigns at the same time. And actually, in our platform, we allow you to do reporting where you can actually see when a certain campaign ran, how much of that campaign was exposed purely in the first party context versus what needed to actually defer back to third party to extend itself out, right? So these things, like running these experiments, ensuring that you have the right strategy in place for maximizing your ability to succeed in the first party data world, and then being able to measure against both first and third party, are things that we believe you absolutely need to do at this point in time.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Just hearing you explain that. Obviously, I'm a a big fan of rolling things out in an agile, iterative manner. So, it seems like this is an incredible opportunity to be able to do that, and to your point, not lose the scale, but really just kind of understand. And I mean, I would imagine there's going to be a lot of changes, or at least evolution, over the next 12 to 18 months in
Mhm.
first party and everything. But no time like the present to start at least
Absolutely.
working with it and understanding how first party works for your organization, right?
100%. I mean, this is the best time to do it because if you find that there are certain things you're not able to do very effectively, you have the time to make those fixes, while at the same time not worry about the fact that you're not able to reach all your consumers, because you can always fall back on third party for now.
This has been great talking with you. One last question before we wrap up. For those that want to learn more about this topic and read up, do you have any recommendations for something that our audience can read, watch, listen to, in order to learn more about what we discussed today?
Yeah, there's a lot of good content out there. I mean, if you're looking at content aggregators, I think in the US, and pretty much global for that matter, Ad Exchanger is a great website to actually go to. Pretty much anything that's happening in the space kind of comes up there. Outside of the US, Exchange Wire is a great place to be at. The IAB is very, very active. We at MediaMath are on the board of both IAB as well as Prebid. Both these agencies, or not agencies really, both of these institutions, if you will, are very active in this space, and they're always creating content. IAB has a lot of really good content. We at MediaMath, we know we keep putting out a lot of our thought leadership content on via blogs. Working with folks such as yourselves. So I think anybody out here should certainly just keep an eye for all of this content that's coming out, because there is a lot of stuff being generated nowadays on that.
Wonderful. Well, thanks so much again for joining the show. For those listening, what's the best way for them to keep up with what you're doing?
MediaMath.com is fantastic. Certainly, you should look at our socials. We are on LinkedIn, we are on Facebook. No, I know we are on Twitter as well. And then, of course, you can just send an email into info@MediaMath.com, and we'll be able to get back to you.
Wonderful. Well, again, I'd like to thank Anudit Vikram, Chief Product Officer at MediaMath, for joining the show. Thanks again for listening to The Agile World with Greg Kihlstrom. See you next week. Thanks again for listening to the Agile World podcast, brought to you by Tech Systems. I'm your host, Greg Kihlstrom. If you enjoyed the show, please take a minute to subscribe on your podcast channel of choice and leave us a rating so that others can find the show more easily. You can learn more and get a copy of my latest book, The Agile Workforce, from my website at theagile.world.